Welcome to Punky's Pro Wrestling. My name is Angelina Wilson, otherwise known as Punky. Thank you, first of all, for getting us to our initial goal of 30 members. Now we have a goal of 50 by the end of the year. So let's do it. Okay. Okay, we have a ton of news. Okay. Andrade is out of the WWE. Amid, I guess, a second wellness violation. Usually that's a suspension, and it was, but I guess he's been released now. WrestleMania 27 in 2027 will be in Saudi Arabia, probably Riyadh. Jerry the King Lawler has had yet another stroke this past Friday. So he has to cancel an upcoming appearance due to recovering from a stroke. So now, Jake Hagar is saying that Tony Khan is not responding to Chris Jericho's texts. But Tony Khan is saying, no, we want Chris to come back as soon as he can. Because you got to remember, Chris is doing Fozzy stuff. And when that's done, he comes back to wrestling. And I don't know what to believe. Jericho hasn't said anything. So, and he's not going to. That's not his style. Vince McMahon recently celebrated his 80th birthday in New York. And was said to look pretty old and pretty frail by those in attendance. DDP, Diamond Dallas Page, real name Paige Falkenberg, has AFib, or atrial fibrillation. It's a very high heart rate. It's beyond sinus tach because it's not a sinus rhythm. It means that the atrium is moving too fast, too hard. So it's an arrhythmia, basically. And he will have cardiac ablation. An ablation is a burning technique. I had it done in my uterus. Didn't work. Hope for a better result for him later this month. Shawn Michaels is getting both knees replaced in October, which he said many years ago that he was in need of knee replacements. WWE is building a new performance center, also in Orlando. It is to be bigger and better than the current one. They'll probably include some technology and stuff like that. That isn't in the original one. Although, I guess when they first started the performance center, it was actually in a college in Orlando. So I guess I actually built one, and now they're building it bigger because they have so many more people training there, and they need more space for people to, rooms for people to cut promos and stuff like that too. So, and areas for things. So that's what they're working on. Triple H is the one that announced it, of course. MJF got married. However, his current rival, Hangman Adam Page, was in attendance, which ruffled some old school feathers, I guess, because he was seen in pictures. It was like, guys, clue, kayfabe's dead, whether old school likes it or not, and old school is still cool, but there isn't much kayfabe left, unfortunately, for the old school. Like I said, I like old school wrestling. I have nothing against it. As Roddy Piper used to say, old school's cool. But you're going to have things like this with the internet, you know? I remember hearing a thing about this very issue with Dusty Rhodes and the Four Horsemen because they'd want to go out to the bar and relax after the show. And there would be times that Dusty would come in and he couldn't talk to them. He'd have to sit way on another side, and it was a little bit weird because they weren't not friends. They had great respect for each other as performers, and they were friends. So it was a little weird, but they had to do it for kayfabe. So, um, just to give you a little backstory on that, Fandango recently got married. He's not using that name anymore. And AJ Styles' contract is up in February. Is he retiring? I guess he put a picture of an hourglass up on his Twitter, or no, his Instagram. And people are starting to wonder. Here is my honest opinion. Even if he does retire and doesn't sign another extension, his goal was to retire by the time he was 50, which makes sense, but when you have one in college, one going to college probably next year, and two more headed that way, you might not be able to. Although he's still going to work in the back for the company, so he'll still have a job, a good paying job. I don't think he will leave the company until after he's in the Hall of Fame. I think that he will, when he does retire, he'll accept a Hall of Fame induction. Then you might see him pop up in AEW in a backstage position. He had said when he was first in WWE that he would take on a backstage position there, which a lot of times is what's called a Legends contract. When you're in those, when you are a legend, a Hall of Famer, and you're in those jobs, or when you just make appearances now and then, it's called a Legends contract. It really doesn't cost them anything because they're only paying you by your appearance. Okay, we're having a special edition of Raw where you appear, you'll be paid da da da. You know what I mean? It's what Roddy Piper and Hulk Hogan both had. You know how I feel about the Roddy Piper situation, how he lost his Legends contract. Hogan lost his, but I think at the end, at some point, they reconciled with him because they could see dollar signs. So, I think they'd make a lot more dollar signs with Roddy Piper, but He died. I feel, I always felt that, yes, Roddy had a heart situation going on with the blood clot he had had previously and whatnot. I understand that. But I believe it was exacerbated and his death was hastened by the situation that happened with Steve Austin, the WWE, his podcast, all of it. I believe the stress from that situation, and if you're not familiar, I'll give you a little primer on that situation. Roddy did an episode of his podcast on Podcast One, which is where they were all doing their podcasts at the time. And he had a comedian and an impressionist come on and do an impression of Steve Austin, and they did an interview. They were laughing. You knew it wasn't Austin. It was never pretended to be. And it ruffled Austin's feathers into a tangled mess. And so he got his podcast pulled from Podcast One, so he had to go to a different format. And he whined to WWE, and of course, Austin's more important to them than Piper, so they took away Piper's Legends contract at the same time. So all that stress on an already stressed heart was not good. And I do believe that contributed to his death. My opinion. I believe that all that stress contributed to his death. I'm not saying it was the sole cause, I'm saying it was a contributing factor. Because he had high blood pressure. That was the other thing. And when you're under all that stress, your blood pressure goes whoop, which causes the heart to work harder. And if there's already parts that are damaged from a previous blood clot, yeah, it's a recipe for absolute disaster, and that's what happened. So, but I just wanted to give you my opinion on that. I don't think I've ever talked about it before. Now, there's still all kinds of stuff going on about Hogan's death. Now they're saying there was an autopsy, which makes sense because they had information they wouldn't have had without one. So, but there's still a lot of unanswered questions. So it is possible when they say an autopsy was done that an external autopsy and a thorough look through of his medical records is what was done. That will happen sometimes. If someone has really good medical records and you feel you can examine them from the outside, they will do that. So had it happen in my own family. My great grandfather was 88 years old when he died. He was like 84 when he was put in the mental hospital because he had dementia, and they didn't have, this was in the 50s, they didn't have nursing homes that could take care of people in the condition that he was in. So they would put them in the state hospitals, which was terrible. And he was frail. He was 88. He fell down, he broke a hip, and within a few months he had passed away. And I have the medical examiner's report. He said he died because he broke his hip and was immobile. He said, I know that. He said, I can see his records. I can see he was taken care of to the best of the hospital's ability. He was a fall risk, and I am not going to subject this 88-year-old body to an internal full autopsy. I'm just not going to do it. Because he was very elderly. We knew, they knew what he died from. And so they chose not to do it. And they may have looked at Hogan and said, okay, there's a whole host of problems here. The medical examiner himself, and said, and he was a lot younger. He was 71, but still, he's 70 years old. We know he's got a host of problems. He just had a very major surgery that can go wrong in very major ways. So we will look at the medical record, and if there's anything we want to check, then we'll do. Sorry, there's hair caught in there. We will do a fuller autopsy if we need to. So I think that was the thought with Hogan. So that's why I wanted to bring that up to you. Because I've seen it in my own family. There is a reason that sometimes they don't do an autopsy. And if they kind of know the cause of death, like in his case, heart attack or whatever, they might not do an autopsy anyway if the family doesn't want it. I know that from when my best friend passed away. His family didn't really want it, and they said, well, and they don't believe it was a heart attack, they believe it was natural causes. If you don't have an answer to put on a death certificate, why wouldn't you do an autopsy in that case? But I asked his parents, and they said no. So. Oh, and apparently Nick Hogan is suing Bubba the Love Sponge over the Hogan documentary, which was ongoing well before he died, which I knew about. And has a restraining order or whatever. I don't know how you get a restraining order over a piece of intellectual property, but okay. As long as he's not using Hogan's intellectual property, in other words, making money off of the image or the name in a certain way. You can say the name, but WWE's not going to let you show video, but they will show interviews of Hogan, I'm sure, which they can do, as long as they have permission of whomever did the interviews. So good luck to Nick in trying to stop it, because I don't think he can. I don't think he can win. Because even if they tell them they can't use the name Hulk Hogan, guess what? They can still do it. Call it Terry Bollea. So, and actually, it's my understanding that he changed his name to Terry Hogan. And that's why the family all have the name Hogan. because at some point he legally changed his name to Terry Hogan. That was my understanding. Everybody's saying it's still Terry Bollea, but so yeah. Good luck to Nick, because I don't think it's going to work. Just my opinion, especially seeing how Brooke's on board with it. So, but even if she wasn't, I don't think Nick has a chance. That's just my opinion. Right? So I think that's all the wrestling news that is news. Thank you so much for joining me. God bless you. Have a wonderful rest of your day. And I will see you. I don't know when the next time I'll see you on this channel is. Maybe next weekend. So, bye guys.